So I've just received the Coolpix P1000 and I thought I would unbox it here. So this is the Coolpix P1000. It's just been delivered from Amazon. I've not opened it at all yet, so let's have a look at what's in it. So inside the box is obviously a thick instruction manual, 5 different languages, so it's obviously not really as many instructions as the manual would make you think. I'm sure I'll look at that. Connection guide, I assume that's to connect it to software, so I'll look at that as well. And then if I open this, pop that open. So then inside here we have some poppy stuff, which is pretty cool. I enjoy popping stuff. That's the plug socket for the adapter for charging it, the thing to go around my neck while I'm carrying it, USB cable, at least a power pack and a lead here, but not the easiest thing to get out, especially not single-handedly. That looks like a travel adapter. That'll be the battery. I might be wrong. Yep, so that's the lens hood. There. Just continue to make a mess. And then in here, I'm assuming, given that it's the largest object, is the camera. So that'll be the camera. And let's just move the box out the way, and then I can get hold of the camera. I was told that it was reasonably heavy. Obviously I kind of expected that with a 24 to 3000mm equivalent lens. So that's the camera. So for size comparison, I just thought I would compare it to my Sony HX400. There's some things I'm going to talk about the camera which will be in relation to that camera, because they've got, I think, the same sized sensor in. One's a 50 times optical zoom, one is 125 times optical zoom. So I thought I would talk about them because they are onto the same sensor, and I will talk about other features as well, but I just wanted to show you the size comparison. So now what you're seeing is some of the footage. What I've done is I've got some video footage, and then I'm going to play, just show you some photos. And the reason for this is because the video footage is obviously just high definition, whereas the photos are the 16 million pixel photos, and I'm mainly going to be using it as a camera, not for videoing. It records in 4K, and there's a few issues with the videoing like I'm doing now. I can zoom in, and so I've done the videos because I know people quite like the idea of, well, how far can this zoom in and what does it look like? So these are all very early me getting used to the camera shots. Something that I think is a brilliant feature of the P1000 is the snapback button. You can't, or at least I haven't found a way, so I don't think you can, use that when you're doing videoing. So for example, here I'm zooming in on the top of the cathedral in Chichester, and I'm then going to knock it into the digital zoom straight onto the head of the top of the cathedral here. And once I lose it, I have to manually zoom back out again to try and find it, and then refocus and then zoom back in if that's what I choose to do. Whereas when doing photos, I can just put my finger on the snapback button. It will zoom it back from, say, 3000 millimeters if I'm at 3000 millimeters back to 500 millimeters. I can then reline up my shot again. So a lot of what I use it for and wanted the camera for is what I would call mid-range shots, not let's see what's on the horizon. So I know there's that novelty value of a 3000 millimeter lens of let's see what is on the horizon here. But picture quality obviously gets worse. When you get to that distance, everything takes on a bluish tinge. There's a lot of heat haze. There's all these different things that interfere with getting a good picture. So it's not like having a 3000 millimeter lens means that you can focus on a window 10 miles away and get this nice pristine shot. So here I zoom in on an aeroplane in the sky, and you'll notice obviously the aeroplane is very faded because you're zooming in on something quite a long way away. It's a moving aeroplane, so this was really hard to keep it in track, because the more I was zooming in, the faster the plane is in relation to where I'm pointing the camera. But what I try and take photos of are normally things like you're seeing here, something at that kind of distance where I want to be able to get a photo, but it's just slightly out of reach of, for example, my Sony HX400, which is a 50 times zoom. So something I wanted to mention is the Sony HX400 has a 2.8 to 6.3 for its f-stop. Now, one criticism that I've seen on different reviews is that the P1000 is 2.8 to 8, and at 3000 millimeters it's f8, and that's quite dark. And then I've seen reviews that have said, the P900 was f6.5, so this is much worse. So what I have done and tested out is, what is the f-stop if I zoom the P1000 to 1200 millimeters, which is the equivalent of the maximum optical zoom for the Sony HX400. Well, the f-stop for the Nikon P1000 at 1200 millimeters is 5.6. The f-stop for the Sony HX400 at maximum 50 times zoom, 1200 millimeters, is 6.3. So I then thought, what about the if I zoom to 2000 millimeters, which is the maximum optical zoom of the Nikon P900, and on the P1000 it's 6.3, on the P900 it's 6.5. So actually it's not worse than these other two cameras. It's not a worse f-stop than the P900, because if you only zoomed to 2000 millimeters, you're going to get the same, or you're going to get a better f-stop than on the P900. And if you zoom to 1200 millimeters, like you would on the Sony HX400, which I love as a camera, then that is 6.3, whereas the P1000 is 5.6. So these videos, or the photos you're about to see, are more like the kind of thing that I take photos of. So it's what I would class as that mid-range photography. So there's this cup which is close up, this is at Chichester Harbour, and then that zoomed right into what was in the distance at Chichester Harbour. So these are all different photos, trying out different focal lengths, and some of them are full 3000 millimeter, some are novelty photos like this one, where I'm then zooming in on something in the distance, and you notice the heat haze. That's not the kind of thing I'm after, whereas this, I zoom in on the X, which is more like the kind of distance that I would zoom in on. And then this was in the foreground of that first picture. Here again is another novelty picture. So I'm not going to talk about these individual pictures, you can see them on the screen. But I just want to talk about the fact that this kind of shot, so the ones of birds, I do a lot of trying to take photos of birds, and they always seem to be just out of reach for me. These ones of the birds, it was an incredibly windy day, and it was really hard to hold the camera steady while taking those photos at 3000mm. But I wanted you to see the clarity. So these are totally unedited photos. This is as they came out of the camera. And just to give you a taste of it. So for example, I would have edited the moon a bit differently to use the moon shot. And these are all my early attempts at using this camera. Again, that photo of something out to sea isn't the kind of photo that I would take. But so far I've been really happy with the camera, with the quality of the photos. The few issues, I like the snapback feature. So for example, of this bird, being able to press a button, snap back out and then go back in. So again, this is another one where I've zoomed in on something that in the previous photo, and the same here, in the previous photo is zoomed out and then the next photo is zoomed in. So the snapback feature works really well to zoom back to 500mm really quickly, refocus, reline up and then zoom back in again. The focusing in low light isn't very good, and focusing on small objects in the distance isn't really very good, and manual focus is quite tricky when you pass about 1000mm, because you're having to twist the focusing ring, and that movement is obviously shaking the whole camera, and to hold the focus on something, and you can't snap back and re-line up again and zoom back in again. So all these photos you're seeing are the kinds of things that I would take photos of. So people, that's my wife, birds, different architecture, spiders, rabbits, just different kinds of wildlife. That's mainly what I got it for. So this has just been a video giving a bit of an overview of the types of photos that you can take with this camera, and these are just my first attempts at using this camera over the few times that I've taken it out and given it a go.